All right, we are live. Um, so I have up the graphic organizer if we want to, I guess, start from there, unless you guys have another starting point.
That sounds good.
Okay. It says, identify at least 2 things from each chapter that you found interesting, challenging, or made you think.
Well, this book makes me think a lot.
It does.
Okay, so I could say overall, I thought this book was really, I feel like when implementing specific data collecting assessments, I feel like this book will be really helpful because it is really specific. I think especially in like chapter 6, I believe, or maybe it's chapter 5. It really went through and like told you like step by step how to do each part of the graph and how to analyze it and really like make sure you're setting it up correctly to really make sure you're getting accurate results with your data, which I thought was really helpful.
Yeah.
For that part in chapter 5, I thought chapter 5 was really helpful, and I love that they had like all of the forms like created for you, so you would plug in the things, and then it was like you plug this in, and then this happens.
Mm-hmm.
That was really great.
I agree. And looking at chapter 5 right now, the chapter that you were talking about, they go into such great detail. And I think as confusing as that is, it's almost nice because I don't think each student is ever going to be the same. And so like you can kind of pull from all these examples and explanations that they've given you, and you can kind of relate the student, hopefully, to one of the many things that they've explained in here. So trying to wrap my head around all of it is me also trying to wrap my head around all these different kind of kids that we will be working with. So it's like overwhelming as it is, trying to relate it to that as well, I guess, is how I'm trying to bring it all together.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, I think that's really cool, and I think that's one of the aspects of the book. I don't feel like it's like a really reader-friendly book. Like I feel like it's definitely wonky to read and stuff. But I feel like when you have like a specific that you have in mind, and you're like, oh, I want to try to figure out something specific on Genome, this will be a good resource to have to look up something and be like, oh, this and this. I can plug all these things in. This is where I need to go. Yeah, that's how I felt, anyways.
Yeah. Overall, I would agree. I think chapter 6 was a little bit more opaque, and I think kind of where that comes from for me is like I can get my head around the statistics and like effect sizes and stuff, but it really, how I've always learned it and how it would really help me to learn how that works is to actually like get like a data set and this is what you do with it kind of thing. And so I mean, just in terms of talking about it, I can understand why Cohen's d wouldn't really be relevant but R square would, that kind of thing, just in talking about statistics, but really in making it work. For this, it would help a lot more to see just, or not even just to see, but even just to have examples to kind of work through to kind of demonstrate how that could work.
Mm-hmm. And I don't really have a lot of experience with baseline or intervention data collecting. So like I already understood like what baseline data was, but the way they broke it down, I thought it was a little bit confusing on some points. But I do like the case examples that they gave. That kind of helped me, understand what was happening. But I think like once I actually do it, I think it'll really click for me a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think even in like with the stuff in chapter 4, with using like the multiple baseline stuff, it's like a lot of the kind of the logic behind it, I think, is a lot of what we would do anyway. It's just kind of, want a different way to frame it and think about it, and particularly in terms of like the data collection. Just organizing it. Like, we're used to running interventions. We're used to running staggered interventions, but just doing it in such a way that you can kind of increase that validity and the effects that you're seeing are due to the intervention.
Definitely.
I thought it was super helpful. In all the chapters about it giving us the case examples, because it helped me put everything into like real life perspective, rather than just throwing a bunch of numbers at us. So that's what I found to be interesting and really helpful.
One thing I found kind of interesting, which I didn't know this when they were talking about the multi-element design, like where you have data and like you don't connect, then you have data and you don't connect. I guess I didn't really understand that. Was that like if the child had 3 interventions, you wouldn't connect them because they don't go together? It's on page 63. Like for some reason that didn't really connect for me.
Let me go back.
I wasn't sure on that. I know it's to compare different interventions, I guess, but I guess I didn't know that you could do that all on one graph.
I see what you're talking about.
So on page 63, are you talking about the 3 different graphs, or how they're sectioned off into 3 graphs?
Yeah, I guess I just didn't know that you could do that since I haven't had experience with this. I always thought it was like one intervention that you were taking data on, but this is like 2 or 3 different ones.
Yeah.
So I guess I just kind of glanced through that. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. That was one of the things that I was like a little confused about. Whenever I've taken graphs, it's been like, like this is this graph, this is this graph, and this is the other. Because especially like when you look at the bottom, which is the weeks, because it looks like they're running different things on different weeks.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So that's why I guess they're doing it that way, but still it's hard to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering it right, it's what you're doing. If you're doing discrete interventions and you keep the data with those, yeah, that's it. Yeah, keep the data with the interventions discrete as well. And so I think from our perspective, I don't really know that I've ever done more than one intervention at a time, or at least not in a way that I would have thought about graphing it that way. But
right.
But that's kind of more of what it is, that if, like I said, if you have discrete interventions, then you track that data discretely as well. But you can use the different symbols or whatnot to chart it in the same graph in the same time. That can overlap, but it's just, like I said, have different data sets for different interventions.
That makes sense.
Like it's called, if you just go to the bottom of page 62, the multi-element design is what it's called, I guess.
Yeah.
Just a lot in general. A lot of everything. And I don't know, I just feel like taking data is so important, and two, it can be a little complicated that I don't know if I would use this as a way to further complicate something.
Right. I mean, I guess it's a good option to think about in the future, depending on, the individual, but yeah.
But this page has 3 different kids on it. So then I was also wondering, are you trying to compare those kids?
Right.
Yeah.
Or are they just 3 different examples? Because then the line goes all the way through the graph, through each kid. So that's why it's very confusing.
Yeah. It's a good point.
I'm pretty black and white. I'm like, this is this graph with this kid at this time.
Yeah.
This is what happened. Now I'll move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Did you all like the MD or the MB design rather than the ME design? Like, was there a certain one that you thought was better, or?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Because personally, for me, I thought the ME design was so much information. Like, I'm looking at it now and kind of like, I have no idea what's going on because there's so much going.
Yeah.
Oh, I see it now. Right.
I think it kind of depends on also what it is that you're trying to do. If you have, are you trying to compare multiple interventions across a single subject, or are you looking to do a single intervention with multiple subjects? So, if you have that staggered introduction of interventions across with different subjects, that would be your multiple baseline. So it kind of depends on, what it is exactly that you're looking to test.
Yeah, Kat, I don't know if you can. I don't know if you're looking at the page on page 65 compared to page 63. So this ME design is not cut into weeks because the bottom part is, or sessions. Now this one is, where the first part on the page 63 was cut into weeks. So they were running it a different intervention. I think it was 4 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And this, they're just doing it over 16 sessions, all 3, and just seeing that. So, like you were saying, it's depending on what you're trying to get out of it. And I don't know if session means day or week, or it can mean whatever.
If they're on the same day and just multiple sessions per day.
Yeah, because this can get you to where you need to be faster than the MD design, maybe. So that's
I also feel that on the ME design, their symbols were really similar. Like maybe they could have differentiated their symbols a little bit more.
They're different colors.
Like you have to look really closely to see
What's what?
Yeah.
Well, and then on the ME design, how like they're different. The MB design, there's not a baseline condition. So I feel like when you're looking at the data, you're like, okay, well, where am I starting? Because it's not showing you the baseline.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that would make a difference either, depending on what you're trying to plot.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of this is concrete if we're actually using with, like, if you had a specific child in mind or an example. I feel like the examples are really helpful, but I feel like this just personally seems so abstract to me because I've never done anything like this. So it's just like you're trying to decode something that just so abstract that it's hard to really pin it down without a specific child in mind or a teacher to explain it to you based on a student that you know.
Well, and I feel like what you were saying about the beginning, in the beginning of this Google Hangout, how this is just so much information, but could just be for so many different students. Like you could use an ME chart for Bob, but you want the ME chart for Susie, but you do something else for, and like you have all of these options. So I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily know, and so I guess I'm asking, like, I don't really think it's telling us that one is better than the other. Do you think it's just giving us options?
Yeah.
Because I think
Like a case by case basis.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point of the book, really, is to just feed us information.
Yeah.
You know, not really give us an opinion.
Mhm.
That's why one is better than the other.
I just found on page 66 it says that NE design can tell you this intervention is most effective and the specific nature of the effectiveness, the level of the variability, and then it can't tell you the generalization beyond different settings and stimulus. So, I mean, it sounds like, yeah, just based on what you're looking for, be able to differentiate which type of graph you're going to be able to use, because everything's going to have its own limitations. So if you're going to be able to, like, I feel like it'd be really nice to have like an Excel sheet, like check this box, check this box, check this box, use the NE graph, check this box, check this box, you're going to use the other one. Because, yeah, it's all going to come
Flow chart.
you're doing what specific child you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone should create that. That'd be really beneficial.
Like at the end of the book.
So obviously, like, I think that one of the next questions in the graphic organizer, because I feel like there's so much information, it's going to be hard to, like, all of us identify things that we found important from each thing.
Right.
But one thing, and I feel like this is like a very obvious thing, but I feel like one of the biggest important things for us as future teachers is that we know how to use this data and make sure that we can use it to inform our practice and see if it's actually effectively working for our students. One of the things at the very end of the chapter was, if we aren't able to implement an appropriate type of tier or intervention for a student, like, that's so much time that we're missing out on. That's a lost opportunity, lost cause. So, when you're applying it to, like, the next question, like, teacher, and why is it important to be able to apply it so that we don't miss out on valuable time with the student.
Mhm.
I agree.
I think, like, one of my biggest fears is, like, I'm going to be put into this situation and I feel like I'm not going to know exactly what to do, like, as a beginning educator. Like, this book is really helpful and I think it's a good resource, but I just, like, really want to make sure I know what I'm doing and, like, what I'm expected to do. I guess that's kind of in the back of my mind sometimes.
Yeah.
I think, and I think that you kind of, authors kind of mention this as they go along, just in talking about that validity. We can run interventions and we can graph data on those interventions to see if they seem to be having an effect, and we can track that, and that doesn't necessarily have to fit into this. That can just be outside of single case, and in many cases that could be appropriate and that could work. This is kind of more of when there are situations where we need something airtight to say that this intervention did or did not have an effect, particularly more for, like, the RTI, as you're looking into, like, tier 2 going to tier 3. You need something to show that this intervention, was run appropriately and did not have the effect that we were looking for. And that would make your case for the tier 3 intervention in that case. So it's kind of, as the stakes go up, what this is talking about kind of comes into play, but it doesn't necessarily have to inform every intervention that we do.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. As you were telling me that, I feel like that's a really good point. And I going back to, I don't remember what class it is because they're all kind of jumbling into one big thing. But
right.
The case that we saw where they were before the court and something like this would be really beneficial if there was a really controversial topic on an intervention that was in place, and if we really needed to support the student, say, like, no, look, this is the evidence of the student being successful. This is why. I'm just thinking of, you keep hearing all this law stuff, and when you have to advocate for your students, or vice versa, you need to advocate for them the other way. Say, this intervention that is in the IEP is not working. Here's the evidence why. As you're telling me that, I'm like, oh, this type of stuff would be really beneficial for those high risk, high stress situations.
Mm-hmm. And then on the graphic organizer, it says, how does this relate to me as a future teacher? Again, making at least one connection here would likely be helpful before meeting with your small group. Okay. So how does this relate to me as a future teacher? I feel like we kind of discussed that, but
yeah, and
all of us, in the sense that I mean, just from our conversation, I feel like a lot of us don't have a lot of experience with this. Like taking the data, putting it together, actually getting a real life situation and doing it ourselves. So I think it relates to us in the sense that we need practice on it.
for sure.
And to kind of cartwheel off of that, I think it's also overwhelming for us because we haven't had a lot of practice hearing all of this information that we should be and could be using and could possibly be using, but still don't yet understand. I think it's like almost exciting but overwhelming at the same time. All this like possibility that this is what we're going to be doing, and it's just like a lot of information. So I think that relates to us in an overwhelming way almost because we don't understand all of it yet, but we need to, if that makes sense.
I think just kind of getting back to that, this is just kind of using just basically using things like time and multiple subjects to make up for the fact that we don't have a control group, is really kind of what it comes down to, just different techniques that we can use to do that. Except a lot of it isn't really drastically different than, say, like, keeping track of like CBM data for like reading goals. All of that would still just tie into this. It's just a matter of a way of structuring that and thinking about it in a way that presents validity, is kind of more of what it comes to. It's not that it is adding to it, in that that is something that you're having to think about that maybe we didn't have to think about before. And getting that data can be challenging in and of itself, but it's just kind of just a different way to structure how you're going about it. And there was something I was going to say, I can't remember now. For the future educator part. I think in some cases, like for a lot of reading and math stuff, there's a lot of like already like evidence-based practices that are already there, and then you're kind of more worried about fidelity. And then you should be able to see if the intervention's having an effect or not. But also, like, for when like a behavior program, there's a lot more of a variety in response and a lot more kind of sort of experimentation. So there's a lot of this that that would actually really work for what we do. So I could see using it quite a bit.
I feel like this also, compared to this book, that were helpful to know as a teacher educator to know, like, if you are missing, to be able to analyze the data correctly and interpret correctly and make sure you're not forgetting things, but you're also not reading too much into certain things that might not be valid predictors or valid components of the data. Well, that was really interesting. I think that's helpful to know because, I mean, since we are new, the chance of us making a mistake is probably pretty high. And a good way to be able to kind of self-check ourselves and make sure we're not seeing what we want to see. I feel like that's something that even I struggle with. I struggle with sometimes in my classroom is like, I think a behavior is happening and I could just see, you get so focused on certain things that you kind of have a hard time pulling yourself out. So like these graphs and data can be a way for you to self-check yourself and say like, actually, that's not a problem at all, or it is something that we need to work on. But there's a way for us to self-check ourselves and make sure that we're interpreting it and analyzing all of what we're doing correctly and not just seeing what we want to see or thinking we see what we see. That would Is there any other questions on it?
I think I just need to let this soak in a little bit more.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I found in a lot of the books, but I think especially this one, it's I really had a hard time to like really sit down and pay attention to it. But when I do, I wish that I had more time to sit down and pay attention to it.
Definitely. I just can't wait to actually start using some of this because then I know it'll click for me. I know it probably won't be as bad as I think it is once I actually start to use it. So
Yeah. Once we're it. And I just am like excited too. Like this is like the nerdy side of me, but like when we are able to apply it and use these graphs and like I feel like how exciting will it be when you like are able to see like, dude, I'm doing this, like I'm making progress, like the students excelling, and I mean what a I don't know what a great visual reinforcement for a teacher.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like give yourself a pat on the back that you figured it out. So
I think that's it for the graphic organizer. We identified questions.
Stuff that made us think.
We said what we thought was challenging. I feel like we answered everything. Do you guys have any final thoughts?
Let it soak in.
Yeah.
it's definitely like a reference to go back and reference. I definitely thought that like it was going to be like a book club, like easier conversational type book, like and some statistics type reading book. Like I was like all excited. I was like, this will be fun. Like this is a lot harder than I thought.
It's like data. It's not
Yeah.
data.
It's a bit mind numbing.
Yeah.
That's like the best way to put it.
We are still in grad school.
Yes. Well, if you guys are good, I can submit this for us all.
Lovely.
Okay.
Good.
That would be
All
great.
All right. Well, I guess happy Thanksgiving break for
Yes.
everybody. And
Then we
Yeah.
have 2 meetings.
All right. I'll submit this, you guys. So I'll see you next time.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.